Hi, I'm Tom Shanahan. Welcome to the End Game. We're going to talk about race and sports. The focus is going to be primarily on how Michigan State football and the Duffy Doherty's 1960s teams were college football's first fully integrated rosters. And it basically influenced all of football. Of course, you had the college football was segregated in the South, but also at a lot of schools before Duffy started having fully integrated rosters, you had unwritten quotas. And the best example of that is USC won the 1962 national title with only 5 black players. The quotas were to have only about a half dozen or so black players on your roster. 1967, USC only had 7 black players. People don't know that. USC was not the model of integration when they went to Alabama to play in 1970. And then, of course, in the 1966 game of the century, played at Michigan State, Spartan Stadium, Notre Dame and Michigan State. Michigan State had 20 black players, 11 black starters, 2 black team captains, College Football Hall of Famers, George Webster and Clinton Jones, and then the South's first black quarterback to win a national title, Jimmy Ray of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Michigan State was the future. On the other side was the past, Notre Dame. They had 1 black player, Alan Page. Times have changed quite a bit from there. So the focus is on Michigan State and Duffy Doherty's Underground Railroad teams. But today, for our first session, I'm going to introduce Herman Bulls and why he's my co-host. I'm proud to have him. And then also our guest, Gary Steele, the first black letterman in football at West Point. So we've made him an honorary Underground Railroad passenger to talk about blazing trails for future athletes. And so I'm really excited about this and glad to have both these two colonels, both retired colonels on the air with me. It's an honor. Let me introduce Herman. Herman is a retired colonel, West Point graduate. He's from Alabama. He was the first black quarterback at his high school in Alabama. And he went to the Army to play football. Ended up getting involved in the Army's broadcasting basketball. And one day he also had a talk show at West Point. And one day he got a call from the basketball coach, some guy named Mike Krzyzewski, asking if he could come on Herman's show. So Herman had a lot to do with launching Coach K's Hall of Fame career. And then later, Gary Steele was also a retired colonel, and he was on the football staff for a while. And he convinced this kid quarterback down in Alabama named Herman Bulls, you've got a future up here at West Point. And both of them have had great careers. So with that, let me introduce Herman. Herman, I'm glad to have you on here. Talk about how we're going to kind of enlighten and educate people that sports heals and enlightens.
Well, Tom, it's a pleasure to be here, and particularly with our first guest, it's really an honor for me because that's a man that certainly set a stage for many people, me included, that have put me on a path that I cannot complain about. And it's particularly fun that we're doing this at this time. Obviously, we've had a tremendous 2 years in our country with 2 pandemics, right? We had COVID, which I tell people, I made a speech about a year ago, and I told people, we're going to solve COVID, because the ingenuity of mankind, womankind, we're going to solve that. And the second pandemic that came to light, that has obviously been around for quite a while, was racism. And I'm convinced that we've made some progress. I'm also aware that we have a lot of progress to make. And I can just say from the corporate perspective in sports, it's just so important because you learn so many things, and that's important. However, what really makes a difference and impacts people's life is the business and the commerce of our nation. And what I hope we'll be able to do is convince a lot of these great athletes that use that competitive spirit that you learn in sports. And then I want you to go from the playing field to the boardroom. And we've had quite a bit of success over the last year, particularly in getting more people of color, particularly Blacks, in the mainstream of the business world So I want to take that mainstream of sports and I want to transfer it to the business world as well.
Yeah, I neglected to say that after Herman retired as a colonel, he went into the business world, and he's collected many awards as top black businessman in America. He's got a trophy case full of those type of awards to go with his sports awards. And then we're especially honored to have Gary Steele here, college legend. He was in the Army Hall of Fame, West Point Hall of Fame, not only for his football career, but also a 6'9" high jumper. Not bad. And then was that the Western roll, Gary, or had you learned the Fosbury flop wasn't around yet, right?
It was my senior year. The Fosbury flop came in, but I was doing well with the Western roll. So you got to go with what you came to the party with.
Yes.
Hey, Gary, I don't know if you know, I actually, you may be aware, I high jumped as well, but I didn't reach your heights. I should have maybe done that at West Point. I would have had a better sports career, but I high jumped 6'3¼ in high school, and I was third in the state of Alabama my senior year. So I realized we both have that high jumping, but I did the Fosbury flop.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you learn in physics that's the best way to do it. I wish I had learned that earlier. I might have gone just a touch higher.
A bit of 7-footer. So anyways, people are always surprised when I tell them the story about Michigan State and Notre Dame, only one black player. And they're also surprised that Army, West Point, didn't have a black football player until 1966. And one person in the media sports media basically avoided race in the 60s. But one person that was aware of it was always behind in the corner of Muhammad Ali if he wanted to change his name, if he wanted to stay out of the Army, was Howard Cosell. So one year at the 1964 National Football Foundation annual banquet and dinner in New York, Howard thought he had a got you question for Army coach Paul Dietzel. He asked him, Paul, how come you don't have any? When are you going to have a black player at Army West Point? And Gary, I'll let you pick up the story from there.
Okay, and of course I wasn't present, but I was told this just a few years ago by a good friend where we live, who was a coach at West Point when I entered my freshman year. And as the story goes, Howard Cosell asked Coach Dietzel the question you just mentioned, and Cosell didn't know, but I was in a prep school, a private military prep school at that time, having graduated high school in 1964, getting academically boosted for entrance into the academy. And so he asked Dietzel the question, and as I am told, Dietzel said, "Well, Howard, I'm glad you asked that question." And then he, of course, related the fact that I was, coming in the following year, and where I was from and all of that business. But as you said, Howard Cosell thought it was a gotcha, and Dietzel had him. Dietzel got him.
Yeah.
So that was the first mention of me entering into the West Point lexicon.
Yeah. Now talk about how you didn't really think about being a pioneer, but one thing that I think helped you adjust to the West Point lifestyle was your father and his best friend had been Buffalo Soldiers at West Point. Tell us that story.
My dad, Frank Steele, and my godfather, Harold Robertson, were Buffalo Soldiers at West Point in the early 40s. And so they had that military background. And I would say that simply my experience with my brother and my sister as Army brats, living in different places around the world, kind of exposed us to many, many things, to life outside of one location in a particular area. We lived in Germany at a very young age. My younger brother, Michael, actually, he spoke German before he spoke English. Excuse me. And and we came back to the States, and then again in 3 or 4 years, then we went to Japan. And and in both of those, in all of the travels that we had, our experiences as a family were very robust. We're very cosmopolitan. And so, the life that we grew up in was one that was, hey, here we are, here's what's going on. And we had every opportunity offered, that anybody could possibly have. And so with that as a backdrop, I guess, when the thought of West Point came up, it was all about, education and opportunity. And hopefully we'd be able to make it academically. And but thinking about my dad and about my godfather and their experiences, they kind of, showed us through their example that you could pretty much do anything you wanted to do as long as you came at it from the right perspective.
Well, Tom, I think
That's how I would start.
yeah, and Tom, I think it's also important to have Gary highlight something that I think was phenomenal in the 60s. I had two of my kids go to West Point, so that's kind of getting a heritage going. But in the 60s, Gary, let's talk a little bit more about your baby brother and the fact that where did he go to school?
My baby brother also went to West Point. He came in, as a matter of fact, I don't know how long and drawn out we want this to get, but I graduated high school in '64. And my brother, Michael, was a year behind me in high school. As I mentioned, I went to a year of prep school to get myself ready to go into West Point. So Michael and I came into West Point together. And Michael was a recruited track and field athlete and very good academically. And Mike had a future as a track and field athlete at the academy. So one of the things that I think really helped us get through the academy was the fact that there were two brothers, and we were there together.
Literal brothers, literal and figurative.
Literal, from the same mama. And so we always were together, not particularly during the week because boy, you're just focused. But on the weekends we could hang out, and we hung out with a group of guys from the various sports that we were aligned with, and also from with our roommates, etc. So we had a little club, I guess, over the years, different terms have come, but we had a posse. We had a group of guys that hung out together, and so that made life a lot easier. I will tell you from Michael's perspective, as we began that first summer, 1965, it was hard, and Herman knows how tough it was when that first summer. And as Michael tells the story, he said, he would look every morning when we got in formation, and he said, "Man, I don't know if I really want to be here." But as he was lined up, he didn't have to move his head very far, but he looked straight ahead and he could see me. And he said, "I'm going to stay here as long as Gary stays here." And he said he would get up in the morning, get in formation, etc., and he'd look and he'd go, "He's still here. I guess I got to stay." And so I didn't know this, of course, for many years after, but when he shared that with me, I'm glad I was able to give him, a little bit of a boost to stay. And I was too naive to think anything but, as the upperclassmen were railing against me and all other freshmen that summer, that there was any a negative thought in what they were doing, aside from them trying to, instill discipline in me and for me to be able to, yes, do it right all the time. And as I've said in the past, some of my squad mates who were white said to me, "Gary, gosh, man, this guy's he's all over you. I mean, do you think like maybe he may be a little bit over the top?" And I went, I didn't know. I just went, no, I got to work harder. I got to work harder. But my white classmates felt that this guy may have been a little over the top in terms of trying to pressure me. And get me out early in the game. But I stayed with it because one of the things that our dad told us was that he didn't say that the Army was unfair or anything like that, but basically you got to work hard. Whatever you do, you got to work as hard as you can. And so Michael and we just kept working hard, and I never let that guy, get to me.
Harry, how many Black cadets entered in your class, and how many graduated, to set a context for the audience?
Sure. I think we had over 1,000, just over 1,000 enter cadets. And of that group of 1,000, I think there were probably 12 or 14 Black cadets that entered. And of that 12 or 14 that entered, I believe there were 8 in the class of '69 that graduated. So it was a very small number, and then probably 25% or so of those that entered, ended up leaving before it was all over. So it was a very, very small group back in the day. And when I look in front of me, the class of '68, '67, '66, the numbers, as you can imagine, going forward were really, really thin. I can't be exact, but the pyramid was there, and there were very few people of color that we could look at in front of us. But I can say that those who were in front of us would occasionally, just check in. How you doing? We did have one Black cadet. It was class of '68 in front of me. Tom Martin, his name was. Gentle guy, just a real giant as far as I'm concerned. And it was nothing overt, but he would just come in, how you doing, Steele? But then he also said, how you doing, Cross? How you doing, Wanless? But the fact that he came and checked in, to me, was really meaningful.
Okay, yeah, and you ended up putting together a great career. You were a second-team All-American as a senior. You had an Army game record, 8 catches, 156 yards in 1968. Detroit Lions drafted you in the 17th round, but you decided to stay in the military. And one of the things I've learned from so many Army stories is a lot of African Americans begin to realize there's more opportunity and less discrimination in the Army than there is out in the real world, I guess, so to speak. Talk about your career moving forward.
Well, I would first say the point you made about less discrimination in the Army than on the outside. I have to say that I saw that growing up and observing, outside of my bubble, because I lived in a bubble, quite frankly. I saw that, and I learned that from my dad and from my godfather, because that's what they told us. They were both World War II veterans, and when the war ended, they got out of the Army, and they had both risen through the ranks, and they were both, I think they were E7s or E8s, master sergeants, sergeant first class. They got out of the service, and they went to work in New York City, as a matter of fact, at the post office in New York City, big building down by what is now Madison Square Garden. And after about a year or so in the civilian world, they both, as they have related to us, they both kind of said, wow, man, we had more responsibility, accountability, and we were treated better in the military than we are out here. And so both of them chose to go back into the service. And that's how, so there was a slight break in my dad's career. But they both went back into the service, and Dad served 20 odd years, and Buck, as he was known, served about the same. So I imagine that was just passed on to us. And I, as an observer, I was observing what was going on in the 60s. And I'm observing from Levittown, Pennsylvania, where I went to high school, and also from West Point as a cadet, and looking at what was really bubbling up in the mid to late 60s. And I'm looking around in my environment at West Point, and I'm going, gosh, here it seems that I was accepted for what I was able to produce. If I guess, did everything I was supposed to do in terms of academically and as a cadet, you look at the pillars that make up West Point. If you were able to do the things there, then hey, you're just another cadet. That's how, once I get past my freshman year, that's how I saw it and felt it. And during my time at the academy, again, I've said it many times that I was unbelievably naive. I didn't experience any overt prejudice or discrimination. I'm sure there may have been some, on the sides, off stage, but I didn't experience anything. And I don't know why. And I've talked to my brother Mike about this too. And we both kind of have the same feeling that it's all about what you could do. If you're doing it, and if you're performing it to standard or above standard, hey, let's go. So I saw that at West Point, and then into the military, I saw that. And so it just seemed to be the way to go. One of the things I want to share this, because there was a point in time around the time of Martin Luther King's death, where I was starting to question my role, and am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And because I saw what was happening, gosh, the unrest was unbelievable, as we know, those of us who are old enough to remember that time frame. And I said, am I in the right place? Should I be at West Point, or should I be out there doing something? And I'm a master of rationalization. And my rationale was, all right, well, let me do this and see how far I can carry it. And what I ended up realizing was, if I succeeded here and I went into the military and did a good job there, well, maybe there's going to be somebody who's seeing, hey, here's a guy who's doing this and he's succeeding. Maybe it's something that maybe I can go that way. And so I started thinking, well, maybe unbelievably, I started thinking about the concept of role model. And so if I'm doing well here, somebody else behind me is going to see me and is going to maybe, choose to do the same thing. So at the academy, again, as I said, I didn't experience it. Mike didn't experience it, though you could see it outside of the walls of the bubble that we lived in up there on the Hudson. And so that's, I don't know, I'm kind of jumping around here, Tom, but that's kind of how I began, my life.
Well, you mentioned the word role model, and a lot of us just go through life and we face the challenges we have each day. And Gary, I can just tell you, even now, when I met you and I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is a guy that not only played football at West Point, he graduated and now he's a coach. And those little vestiges of seeing somebody that looks like you succeed, that has a lot of power. So you were a role model, you continue to be a role model. And Tom, I want our listeners out there to know that even though in the moment we don't see ourselves in the historical perspective, we're making an impact on people on everything we do.
Let's, you're talking about support, Gary. Let's tell two stories from your football career. The game at Tennessee and the game at Notre Dame. Tennessee, you're a sophomore, and you go down to Memphis to play Tennessee in the Liberty Bowl. And your experience, let's see, that was in 1966. In 1965, Warren McVay, Houston's first black player, recruited by Bill Yeoman, a former Michigan State assistant coach under Duffy Daugherty. And they played at the Liberty Bowl against Tennessee, and Warren just suffered terrible shouting of insults and racial comments from the stands. It was just an awful day from everything I've read. But you didn't have that experience. But beforehand, I think his name was Townsend Clark. Is that right?
Yes, team captain, Tony
Yeah.
Clark.
Yeah, he had a little talk with you before they went down to play Tennessee.
Yes, it was the week of the Tennessee game, and I'm a sophomore, and just made the team as a varsity player, and I can't remember. Someone said, "Hey, Tony Clark wants to see you after practice," and here I am, a sophomore, just made the varsity, and the team captain wants to talk to me after practice. I'm going, oh God, this has got to be as bad as that plebe summer thing, So at any rate, after practice, Tony sat down with me, and he just, he said to me, "Hey, Gary, we're going down to play Tennessee this weekend." And well, yeah, Tony, for sure. And he just related to me as the team captain. He said, "Don't know if you've ever thought about it, but the first time that we've played down south, and don't know what the reaction, if any, is going to be. And I just want you to know that I got you. We got you. You are a member of the Army football team, and that's first and foremost." And again, my naivete, I didn't even think about that because I was so busy trying to exist at West Point as a cadet, as an academician, as a football player, that my focus was, I was varsity, I was first team, I got to stay first team. And who are we playing? We're playing Tennessee this week. All right, what's the scouting report? Where's the book? And so it was all about, trying to prepare for the Tennessee game. And so I'd never thought about any issues, but then we went down to Tennessee, and now it's on my mind because Tony put it in my mind. And so we went down, we played the game, and there was one play where, it was a ball that was thrown, and I did not catch the pass. And we both, myself and the defender, rolled out of bounds and rolled up against the stands. And so at that moment, as I got up, it came back into my head. Is this going to be what Tony was talking about? And I thought about it for a moment, looked in the stands, and nothing happened. And we jumped up and we ran, and I ran back into the huddle. So it came to mind just for a split second, but it left my mind because I was too involved in the game to worry about it. That's my recollection of that moment. And we ended up getting our butts beat by Tennessee. But yeah, it happened, and we moved on.
Then the other game, this is an example of how this sports media avoided race in the 1960s. You go to Notre Dame, they have one black player, the great Alan Page.
Yes.
And after the game, he puts his arm around you because he knows you're the only black Army football player. Now, in today's media, that would have been a shot that would have been on, photographers would have taken, video would have been taken of, but nobody was paying attention. But Alan must have been trying to send you a message to just hang in there, right?
Yes, and I just want to go back to the Tony Clark thing in Tennessee game very quickly, because as you grow and you understand a little bit more about teams and leaders, I've reflected on that, and I said, I don't know if somebody put Tony up to talking with me, but that what an extreme example of leadership. He recognized that, hey, we're going to be doing something, who knows where it's going to go. And he came to me as a leader and said, what he said. And I look back on that, and obviously I've never forgotten it all of these years. And, what a great move on his part. And that's what leaders do. Leaders try to actually to set the culture and maintain the culture. And that's what Tony Clark did in that moment. I've mentioned it to him over the years. He doesn't remember it, but I do. And that may speak to a little bit about what Herman said earlier, that, you don't think about these things, but, you do have an impact. And now coming to the Notre Dame game, another game, my gosh, the hallowed fields of Notre Dame. And the touchdown Jesus, as you're laying on the ground, you look up at one end of the stadium and there's Jesus, on the building behind you. But yeah, I remember lining up against Alan Page and I went, my Lord have mercy, he's big. And he's a defensive end, I believe, and I was a tight end. So I did everything I could to avoid Mr. Page. And but again, that was another game that we were unsuccessful. But after the game, Alan did just a moment. It was just like a split second, and he said something along the lines of, "Hey, you played a good game. Keep up what you're doing." Nothing, more than that or deeper than that. But that's what he said to me. And again, a moment, maybe a 4 or 5 second interlude in my life that I remember. Alan probably doesn't remember it, but I do, and that certainly made a difference to me, because Alan Page was a god, and he went on to have an unbelievable career at Notre Dame, in the NFL, and as a judge, I believe. So he's quite the man. So again, modeling, assisting, supporting, some very important things that go to creating unbelievable cultures for organizations.
Well, Gary, as you reflect on everything you've done and you look at where we are today, what advice would you have, and I want to say particularly for young Black athletes?
Wow, that's a heavy question. How much time do we have?
Your first two or three takeaways that if you're listening to this.
Sure. First, I would say, if you're talking about from an athletic perspective, be all you can be. Be the very best at your position, be it football, basketball, swimming, hockey. Be the best that you can be at that position. I would say, and of course, this is all based on my experience, I would say, look beyond sports. Hard to do, I think, but look beyond sports, because sports is fleeting, as we know, right, Herman? There was a time when I was a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, a little bit bigger. But that was a, boom, snap the fingers, it's there and it's gone. And what is beyond that? If you can, think beyond sports, and what can you do perhaps to prepare yourself for life? One thing that I've thought about is that sports, for me, has to an extent made my life easier. I think about transitioning from sports at the academy to the Army. That was my job after graduation. And I remember being in situations where I'm going, oh Lord, I don't know how I'm going to, get through this. And one of the things that I did was I related back to sports. And when I went back and I looked at the sports piece, I remember saying that, wow, this can't be that hard, because I played football, I did track. So the sports and the athletic piece was something that prepared me for whatever challenges that I was going to face post sports. So think beyond sports. Basically, you can use sports as a vehicle to help you get where you want to be, but look beyond sports and what's it going to give you. Because when I think we all know that when you run the numbers from an outstanding high school athlete to a professional athlete, and one who succeeds for more than 2 or 3 years in that professional sport, as you did, Herman. I did a little study some years ago when I was doing some speaking, and the numbers are so infinitesimal for those who are studs at one level and who make it. So there's got to be more to your life, in my mind, than sports. Think of the sport, enjoy it, play it, do the best that you can, but use those things that sports gives you. And as you prepare for life beyond sports, as I said, I look at, what I've done over my time, and even now, at the ripe old age of 75, I think back to football and track at West Point and what it taught me and how it taught me to be tough and stay online with the things that I need to focus on. So sports is great. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. And Herman, I hope I answered that question. So the takeaways are: 1, do it well. 2, look beyond sports. And 3, look at the big world that's out there, and what is out there for you to grab a hold of that sports can help you get to.
Well, let's wrap this up. Both of you guys can maybe talk about this. A year or so ago, General Shelton, Jim Shelton, I believe, he died. And David Meredith wrote a column in the Washington Post, the Pulitzer Prize winner David Meredith, about how Big Jim Shelton was proud that the military was leading the way on equal rights and integration, and that the rest of the country could learn a lot from the military. Both you guys have lived it, both as West Point officers, and then afterwards in your second careers. Kind of, I guess, talk about what we can all, what the nation can learn from what the military example is being set.
Herman, you go.
Okay, I'll start. Like Gary said, in terms of his experience at West Point, one of the things about the military, and I think back going Ranger School, wherever, I mean, if you're preparing to defend the country and therefore put your life at danger, the meritocracy really comes to play, okay? Because this is not jihad where we're going to put on a vest and go out and sacrifice ourselves for whatever, because the will is to want to live. However, the point is you're willing to put your life up, and you go through this thought process. When I went to Gary, obviously the Vietnam War was going on while Gary was at West Point. When I went to West Point, the Vietnam War was still going on, and you sat there as this high school stud, so to speak, and you're thinking, what am I really getting into, and am I willing to do it? And you make in your mind, you say, yes, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to make this sacrifice. So having said that, getting in an environment where it's team oriented, where you have to depend on another person to be successful. There are not many islands of success in the military. you do have this meritocracy. Right now, one of my very good friends is Lloyd Austin, who not only had a phenomenal military career, but he's now Secretary of Defense. And he was a senior when I was a freshman, and Big Lloyd's this booming voice and just a stature of leadership and credibility. And we are doing well. Now, I want to give the military all the props that you're talking about, and it's really good kind of coming up. And one of the areas that we still want to look at, however, is the number of general officers and making sure that that representation is also there. So any organization, it comes down to kind of at the senior levels, there's a socialization process. And if we're not aware of implicit and unconscious bias and how that can seep into how personnel decisions are made, we have to be aware as leaders that others, as we talked about earlier, are looking at what happens at the top. And if we don't make a conscious effort, and I just had an event last night, Gary, I got to get you involved in an executive leadership council, top 800 African-American business people in America. And we focus on these issues, and we're focusing on them in the corporate world. And the military writ large does an excellent job kind of getting things up, but we got to get these 2, 3, and 4-star generals and make sure we get the appropriate representation at that level as well.
Mhm. Yes, very well said, Herman. I agree with you 100%. I would add, over my time from 1970 through 1993, I saw great change. When I went to my first unit in the early 70s, we were still obviously involved in Vietnam. We still had challenges in terms of equal opportunity in the military. It's funny, there were race riots in units in Germany and in Panama, in the Canal Zone, where my brother Michael was stationed. And that was when the Army started developing the concept of equal opportunity offices and officers. And I remember going to mandatory classes about race, etc. And so I think the Army realized there was the challenges that they were facing. And I think they really started leaning forward and doing a really good job of meritocracy you talked about, Herman, of building this thing. Hey, we need to make change here. And so they created an organization within the Army to force that change, to educate people. And I believe, from my experience, that it got better from the early 70s, and moving forward from there. The challenge, of course, is that, as you said at the outset, Herman, it's never over. We got better, but then it seems to me from the outside now that we've fallen back. And I can't explain why. Maybe it's a national thing, but we've kind of fallen back a little bit, and maybe we kind of need to, bring this up again. We can do better. I do feel that in the military, my experience was back in the days of the draft. You took a bunch of guys then, and you threw them all in a pot and you stirred them up. And your tent mate could be, as a Black man, a white guy from Detroit, Michigan. But he was your tent mate, and in Vietnam even. And so all of a sudden you started learning about the other person by being with him and sharing experiences. I'm not necessarily advocating the draft, but maybe it's not a bad idea. Where there was a mixing of people, and so I've always said that out of those types of experiences, people of any race go back where they came from, and they can actually speak to the experience that they had with people who were not like them. And when folks back in those locations would say, well, you know, so and so and so and so, well, yeah, you know, I don't know, you may think that way, but let me tell you about Herman Bulls. You know, he was my tent mate, and you know, the story goes on. So I think a lot can come from exposure and sharing. Military has done a good job, can do more, can do better. I think as a nation, we can look to the military as an example, but it's something that leaders must embrace and must actually act on. And that happens when you get those 1, 2, 3, and 4 stars that you mentioned, who are in the game, who are at the table, and who are able to be involved in the discussions around what's actually happening within that organization. So while we have made progress, we have to be careful about stepping backwards, inadvertently, perhaps, but stepping backwards. We have to we've got to stay the course. We've got to keep pushing. We've got to make it work, because at the end of the day, it's going to make things better for each individual who's involved, and it's going to make things better for our nation. It's my belief.
Great. Yeah, that's why I enjoy writing about Army so much, as I've been fascinated by this meritocracy and how the players have told me about it. Let me bring it back to Michigan State. Herbert, you mentioned Lloyd Austin. One of Michigan State's Underground Railroad players from the 60s was Ernie Pasteur, and he came from segregated North Carolina. Michigan State, played on those great teams with Bubba Smith, George Webster, and his son went to West Point, Ernie Jr., and his commander was a major named Lloyd Austin. Small world. And I wrote a story about it. People can find it on my website, tomshanahan.report, and learn about the great respect everyone had for Lloyd Austin going way back. So, all right. Well, I hope we educated some people about not only the military and West Point, but also about how it was Michigan State, not Alabama and USC, that led the integration of college football. You can read stories on my website about that. And what I always say is I will put my research up against anybody, anytime, anywhere. And Michigan State led the way, no other school. Duffy Daugherty and his teams and his players, and the Southern Black high school coaches that sent him players because they trusted him. All right. Thank you much. It was an honor to have both of you on there. Gary as a guest and Herman as my co-host. And we'll be back with episode 2 sometime in the future.